what do? I clean up your things. There is such a thing as business ethics. Now let's just talk about ethics for a minute, because oh man, when I mentioned the term ethics, people get all over the place, and they have all sorts of notions and that sort of stuff. And you have your ethics, and I have my ethics, and Pete has his ethics, and this culture has its ethics, and that culture has its ethics, and who's to say, and all sorts of stuff like that. Now, uh, part of this, my approach, not my appeal, but my approach, is to indicate that ethics, contrary to the usual belief, is a public thing. All right, you might talk about your ethics. All right, but I want to call this "Get Over Yourself" course. All right, you did not come up with your ethics. We'll look at where it came from in a little bit, but you certainly didn't come up with your ethics. Think about the word ethics for a moment. It comes from the Greek word ethos, and that means habits and customs. All right? Habits and customs, ways of doing things. And consider this, uh, you know, when you are young, you learn the ways of doing things, right? You learn how to do things. You learn what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. If you don't do the right thing, then the people in the group you live in correct you. Nowadays, they give timeouts and that sort of stuff. We can talk about that. All right? But it's the habits and customs of a society, of a community. I'm going to say a little bit the practices of a community. Why? Because we're all part of a community. We wouldn't survive without a community. And a community wouldn't survive without uh, specific practices. And you could call them rules for behavior and that sort of stuff. Okay? Also, some people make a distinction between ethics and morals. I'm not sure what that distinction amounts to. Uh, I'm probably a little lazy on this. I use the terms synonymously. And if you think about the name mores, or morality comes from mores, and mores are people's ways of doing things. So, ethics or morality constitute a set of societal rules for behavior, standard practices. Okay, there was a book that came out a couple of years ago, and the book was called "Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten." And there is probably a certain sense in which everything you need to know about ethics you learned at least from the home, and then by the time you got to kindergarten. All right. Uh, what counts, what you can do, what you can't do, what annoys you, what you want to break the rules for, and that sort of stuff. Okay, so ethics is a public thing, standard practices, and that sort of stuff. Now, ethics deals with several questions. Okay, uh, and let me summarize them into three. First, what actions should one perform? When you come up with your ethical issue, you're going to say, what should I have done in this case, right? What should I have done here? Is this okay, what I've done here? Uh, Second question, and this one is often overlooked because we start worrying about what we should do, and that's the question: what sort of person should one be? Now you take a lot of leadership courses and that sort of stuff. Say what should a leader be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, okay, well, what sort of a person should an ethical person be? And we're going to talk about some things called, and we'll talk about the name a little bit later. Some things called virtues. Good habits, right? Good habits for living well. And then the final question, and the one at the heart of it all, is what does it take to be happy? And what do we mean by happiness? We can translate that into what does it take to be fulfilled, or any number of other things. Okay, but anyway, to sum it up, there is a Roman Stoic philosopher whose name is Seneca, and you will find out through the course of the semester that I'm rather fond of Roman Stoic philosophers. But this guy's name was Seneca, And if you think, excuse me, if you think things are tough now, you got to remember the days of Seneca. He lived during the days of Nero, and he was one of Nero's teachers. And Nero got a little ticked at him, and so Nero condemned him to death and made him slash his throat. Now that's nasty politics if you think our politics are bad. And you can also remember there was a philosopher, Socrates, who got a whole bunch of his fellow Athenians angry at him, and they accused him of corrupting the youth and a kind of atheism. Of course, if you had the Greek gods, you might want to be an atheist. They were kind of roguish characters. But anyway, Socrates got condemned to death and had to drink the hemlock. And then one of my other favorite philosophers is Cicero, and he got Pompey and Mark Antony mad, and they had him executed. And they cut off his head and hands and hung him on the Roman Forum. Things were really nasty back in the days of the Roman Empire, and in the days of Athens and Sparta in Greece. But anyway, let's go back to Seneca, because I love this. He calls this the ethical challenge. And it's this: to live happily is the desire of all men. First, therefore, we must seek what it is that we are aiming at. We got to figure out this good we talked about. Then we must look about for the road by which we can reach it most quickly. And I think ethics boils down to this: what are you looking for? And how do you get there? And to put it in a nutshell, all right? So that's what we're going to be doing. Now, we've already talked about your growing up and getting things before kindergarten and that. But where do we get these ethics? And I'm going to suggest you may have not just one ethic in you, you may have several ethics in you. And then we'll have to sort these out, because there are, and I'm going to suggest just two, several kinds of moral communities. All right? But where do they come from? Good deal of you have gotten them from your religion. You get the Ten Commandments, you learn to do this, right? Excuse me again. You clearly get it, if you're lucky enough to have them, from your parents or your family members. It's one of the jobs of parents, to teach children right from wrong. You may not always agree with what your parents think is right or wrong, but that's one of their jobs, it would seem to me. If you belong to a professional organization, they're going to have codes of ethics. My wife is a CPA, she's an accountant, so she's got the AICPA code of ethics. I've worked for years with financial service professionals. Certified financial planners have a code of ethics. All sorts of financial planners have codes of ethics. You'll also get ethics, if you're very, very lucky, on a job from a mentor. And we can talk about some bad mentors and some good mentors. Or if you had somebody, let's say in Boy Scouts or something like that, who took you under their wing, or Girl Scouts, and taught you some stuff. That person you look up to, who taught you some things you hang on to. All right. Clearly you get it from your school. Clearly you get it from your school. I don't think you need any social studies to tell you that. And depending on whether you are lucky, you get good moral principles from your school. And if you're not so lucky, you may get some faulty ones. But anyway, you get so many from the school that Plato was particularly concerned. He's the Greek philosopher who was a chronicler of some of Socrates' stuff and famous in his own right. But Plato wrote a book called The Republic. And in The Republic, he's talking about the importance of education. And the importance of education, to his mind, was it was important not only for giving you scientific knowledge and that sort of stuff, but for forming you morally. And then I think one of the biggest sources nowadays of ethics education is the media. All right? We learn so much about behavior from watching role models on the media, and we may not even be aware of the fact that they are role models. And I will probably have some things to say about that, and about the roles of fathers as portrayed in the media. Being a father, I'm kind of biased that way. But we learn very, very much what appropriate behavior is